Golden.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We are delighted to have a very special guest, homegrown, to come and join us today with a very special presentation about a very special book. If you are from Tuskegee or you grew up here, you know that what was once City Park is now Henderson Park. And we're going to learn all about the person for whom that park is named today. I'm going to read a formal introduction and then I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. Edwin B. Henderson II was born in Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, attended the laboratory school there, and later attended Boggs Academy in Georgia for high school. Returning to Tuskegee, Mr. Henderson received a bachelor's degree in history and then moved to California where he studied photography and television engineering. In 1991, he enrolled in Tuskegee University's School of Education and received a Master of Counseling and Student Services. He then moved to Falls Church, Virginia, inheriting his grandparents' home, which is listed on the City of Falls Church and the Virginia State Registry of Historic Places. In 1994, Mr. Henderson received a fellowship with the International Foundation for Education and Self-Help's Teachers for Africa program, and was placed at the United States International University in Nairobi, Kenya. He has been an educator for 25 years, retiring from Fairfax County Public Schools in 2012. In 1997, Henderson founded the Tenor Hill Heritage Foundation to promote awareness of African American history and Northern Virginia's civil rights pioneers. In 2007, he founded Henderson House Incorporated to preserve the home and intellectual property of E.B. and Mary Ellen Henderson. He serves on several local boards and commissions, such as the Falls Church Historical Commission, the Falls Church Arts and Humanities Council, and the Fairfax County Historical Society, among others. Mr. Henderson's advocacy for public history works directly to promote public awareness and respect for all people of every race and culture in the communities where they live. In 2013, E.B. Henderson was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. This took 8 long years of nominations and advocacy, which led to the eventual enshrinement. In 2021, Ed Henderson was appointed to Falls Church City School Board and today is a consultant for the Equity Initiative Project. On February 20th of this year, the book, The Grandfather of Black Basketball, The Life and Times of E.B. Henderson, hit the bookshelves. And Ed looks forward to the next chapter in his life. Mr. Henderson is married to Nikki Graves Henderson, who has been his greatest asset in his work to preserve history. That is the official biography. However, I have known this young man since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. I am Norma McGowan Jackson, councilperson representing District 1 here in the city of Tuskegee. And in a former life, I was a kindergarten teacher. I taught kindergarten for 25 years at South Macon High School. A part of the impetus for that is the wonderful lady with the twinkling eyes who was my kindergarten teacher and Ed's mother. And so I am just delighted to present to you Edwin Bancroft Henderson II, better known as Ed. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a wonderful introduction, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you didn't go into some other things.
I know, I chose not to.
But growing up here in Tuskegee, you know, like you said, there was the Tuskegee City Park, which is now E.B. Henderson Park. And then that was, the White Park, right? And then for us, there was Cleve Abbott Park. Both of those men were pioneers in physical education and athletics in the United States. My grandfather, E.B. Henderson, he was this book is about him, and it goes into many aspects of his legacy, or rather his background, going back to slavery, going back to Native American heritage as well. But the crux of the book is really a study in African American history from Civil War to Civil Rights, under the background of a biography of this man. Now, what he is known for is, there's three things he's known for. He's a prolific writer. His mother taught him to read and write at an early age, and he took to it like a duck to water. The other thing that he's known for is his pioneering in physical education and sports. The third thing that he's known for is pioneering as a civil rights activist, establishing the first rural branch of the NAACP, which he did in his hometown of Falls Church, Virginia, because they were going to establish marginalized areas in the town where people could live and own property. And therefore, he started the first rural branch of the NAACP to fight that effort, which went to the Supreme Court in Warley versus Buchanan in 1917. But back to sports. My grandfather was an avid nature lover and sports enthusiast. But there was no organizations for participation in sports when he was growing up. People played sports, but there were no leagues. There were no records kept. There were no referees and things to enforce the rules. It was basically sandlot. After he finished minor teachers college, normal school number 2, he was encouraged to go to Harvard University's Dudley Sargent School for Physical Training. And that was the only place where a person could go to get the certification to become a physical education teacher. He was encouraged by a woman named Anita Turner, who was the first African American to get that certification. But you had other people that went there as well. People like Booker T. Washington went there for one term. Teddy Roosevelt went there for one term to learn how to take care of themselves and physical activities that were beneficial to good health. But if you wanted to be a physical education teacher and get the certification, you had to have 3 terms. And my grandfather, he could not afford to just, not work and to go to school full time. So what he did was he spent 3 summers there. And the first summer that he went there, he was introduced to the fundamentals of basketball. Now, the game of basketball, this was in 1904. And in 1904, basketball was officially introduced to the public at the St. Louis World's Fair and the St. Louis Olympics in 1904. He recognized that African Americans could really use this game, and that it was particularly adaptable to blacks because, unlike baseball and football, where the goals are basically linear, the goal in basketball is vertical, 10 feet tall. And I know everybody's seen the movie White Men Can't Jump, you know, but you know, this was way before that. But when he learned the game of basketball, in 1904 he came back to Washington, D.C. He introduced the game, teaching it to his students, and then organizing a intramural program where all of the schools, he was the only physical education teacher. And so he had to go to all of the schools where he was instructing the boys, okay? And he started, every school had teams, and he started teams where all of these schools would play against each other. But he recognized that basketball was not the only sport that needed to be taught. And that there needed to be rules. There needed to be rules, and there needed to be people that would enforce those rules. So he started the first African American Athletic League. And when you start a league, what you create is rules on how the game is played and how the game is called. When you create, the other thing that he did was he created the Eastern Board of Officials. And he created the Eastern Board of Officials before he started the Interscholastic Athletic Association, which was the first league. And he trained these officials who were going to enforce these rules of the league where the youth were playing. And almost immediately after he started his league in 1906, the athletic clubs of New York started their own league, which was the Olympian Athletic League. Now, EB's league was the Interscholastic Athletic Association of Middle Atlantic States. So there were all kinds of teams from all over that wanted to join his league. And not just in New York, but everything from New Jersey to North Carolina. There were teams that joined his league. And the first couple of years, well, the teams of New York and the teams of the Interscholastic Athletic Association challenged each other to a basketball championship, which they called the Colored Basketball World Championship. And the first 2 years, the Smart Set of Brooklyn won the championship. This did not sit very well with EB. So he started a team at the 12th Street YMCA. And he started it at the 12th Street YMCA in 1908, the year that Teddy Roosevelt laid the cornerstone for the YMCA. There wasn't a building there yet.
Wow.
And he started this team, getting most of the players from Howard University and other teams that were in the city that played on other teams. And he pulled the best together into this team at the 12th Street YMCA. One of those players was the best player that had played on the Smart Set of Brooklyn. Their best player wanted to become a doctor. And so where did he come? To go to medical school. He came to Howard University. Okay, so my grandfather grabbed me and said, "Come on, you're going to play with us now." And for the next 2 years, they went undefeated, beating all the teams of New York and claiming the Colored Basketball World Championship. Now, but he promised my grandmother that after they got married, he would no longer play basketball. And in their last game, when they played St. Christopher's of New York on Christmas Day, 1910, my grandparents got married Christmas Eve, 1910, and then caught the train up to New York where they were going to have their honeymoon. Now, back then, the host team took care of all of the accommodations, travel and lodging. So all of their accommodations were taken care of while they were going to be on their honeymoon. And then after the game, he had to tell the team that he was going to have to retire. But this game, when he played St. Christopher's on Christmas Day at the New York Casino, he wasn't quite himself. He had no legs. And there was a young, taller guy who he said, "You're going to have to take my place at center." My grandfather was 5'10", and was known as one of the best center in colored basketball at that time by the New York World. And he couldn't. This guy was killing him out there. So he said, "Young boy, come here. You're going to jump center because after every basket, there was a jump ball at center court." And my grandfather and Huddy Oliver, the guy that was on the Smart set that came, and he said, "You want to come with us? You're going to be a doctor. You're going to come with us and play. We're going to distribute the ball," because that's what the center used to do back in those days. The center in 1910, the center was more like a point guard. Okay, he distributed the ball and was a playmaker. Okay, so they let the young boy, taller young boy, play center, and then my grandfather and Huddy Oliver would pass the ball around. And back then, the games were not very high scoring like they are today. There was no 24-second clock. There was no dunking. You know, it was more like an aggressive game of passing the ball, more like soccer even. Okay, so after he stopped playing, he concentrated on writing, and he got a contract from the Spalding sports equipment company, Spalding Brothers Sports Equipment, to write a handbook under the auspices of the Interscholastic Athletic Association of the Atlantic States. This booklet that he wrote between 1910 and 1913 was the first chronicling of African American participation in athletics. And they started it grew exponentially every year. And he would go out and the first year, he just sent out all kinds of requests for photos and information about teams and about leagues. And then he wrote this book. And the last year, they told him that they couldn't write. I have the letters that were written by the Spalding Company, James E. Sullivan. And the last year he said that they could not write the book, produce the book that year because of the hostilities in Europe in 1914. But you know, that doesn't ring true because they did a booklet for the white athletic league, school league in Washington, D.C. that same year. What they really were doing was my grandfather had built such a synergy in athletics that the Spalding people were afraid of the idea of black inferiority was endangered by what he was doing. So they would not publish his book anymore after that. And the same guy, James E. Sullivan, was also the president of the AAU. The AAU encouraged EB to start his own league because they were not going to allow the black teams to play against the white teams that were members of the AAU, because everything was segregated. And so these are some of the obstacles that he ran into and overcame. But he built a solid He built the infrastructure for black people to participate in organized sports. And then he chronicled it through his writing, in addition to the Spalding Handbook, official handbook of the Interscholastic Athletic Association of Mid-Atlantic States. At the behest of Carter G. Woodson, he wrote The Negro in Sports in 1939, and then he asked him to do it again in 1949. And the organization, the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, did a encyclopedia set. And one of the books was on athletics, entitled The Black Athlete, which he also wrote. Okay. But he also wrote 3,000 letters to the editor. He was known for his writing of letters to the editor. And during his lifetime, he wrote over 3,000 of them, usually on some aspect of race relations and civil rights. And then in his final years, he moved here to Tuskegee to live with his son and his grandchildren. Now, when I was born, my grandparents drove all the way down from Washington, D.C., you know, on these, you know, little roads before the interstate highways. And they got here, and my parents told him that they were going to name me Dave Meriwether Henderson. My grandfather, when he heard that, he went to bed and he wouldn't get up for days. And then finally, my parents got together and they said, "Well, maybe we should name him for your dad, Jimmy." And so they went to tell him that they were going to name me Edwin Bancroft Henderson II. And he threw back the covers, went down and got something to eat, and he was fine. Okay, so he was playing hard to get and holding out, you know. But coming here to Tuskegee, and George Clay knows this story very well. You know, in addition to starting the first rural branch of the NAACP in Falls Church, he was a member of the original Washington, D.C. branch when it was started in 1913. But then when he came here, he was instrumental in starting the Macon County NAACP. And so there's three. And he was also the president of the state NAACP in the state of Virginia. And many times he was working with all of these entities at the same time and holding executive positions and chairing committees in Washington, Virginia, and Falls Church all at the same time. And so he was a very busy man. He was a very busy man. And when he came here, you know, to Tuskegee, he fell right into the community. The people on campus knew who he was because of his association with this group called AFERD, which is the American Alliance for Health, Physical Education, Exercise, and Dance. And he started the first chapter of that for blacks because it was very segregated, because a lot of those schools in the South did not want to have blacks to join that organization. But here but he integrated that in 1954. And so Dr. Howard Davis, who was the athletic director here up on campus, and Cleve Abbott and Coach Alba and all of these people, you know, they were friends. You know, they really enjoyed having him here in the community as someone that pioneered physical education amongst black people. And so, you know, I am honored to have been named to be his namesake. And I'm hoping that the book will help to tell his story. I have been working on honoring my grandfather for probably the last 20-some years. We got him into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2013 after 8 years of nominating him every year. And the first year we sent in a booklet of 138 pages, and then we had letters from Henry Louis Gates and John Hope Franklin, Bill Cosby before he met his infamous demise, and many other, the first black player to play in the NBA, Earl Lloyd, had a letter. Dave Bing presented a letter. But nobody opened the 138-page document. And when we talked to the curator, nobody knew who he was, even though they had letters of his. We had letters from them where they were asking for things from him, including copies of his book, so that they could tell the story of how black people learned to play basketball. Well, that didn't work. So the next year, we thought outside of the box, and we did a 7-minute video, burned 28 copies of DVD, and we sent that up there. Still nothing. The next year, we got footage from the Today Show when Arthur Ashe was being interviewed by Brian Gumbel. And we included that. It wasn't cheap either. But we included that where Brian Gumbel asked Arthur Ashe, he said, well, Arthur, why'd you choose this topic? Surely this has been done before. And he said, yes, the first one to do it was Edwin Henderson, the first publicly appointed physical education teacher in the country, black, in the colored schools of Washington, D.C. And so we added that to it. And we sent 28, burned, 28 more DVDs and sent that up there. Still nothing, but we kept pushing. We had a conference on black basketball in Washington, D.C. in conjunction with the YMCA, the Smithsonian, and Howard University. And we just kept pushing, but what really did the trick was the owner of the Harlem Globetrotters, a man named Manny Jackson, who we came into contact with through another Hall of Fame that my grandfather had been inducted into, became the chairman of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And he instituted a special category for African American pioneers. And that's how my grandfather got in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And so after that, things kept happening. The University of District of Columbia built a statue of him just recently. The Washington Wizards, I've been doing a number of programs in honor of E.B. Henderson, and Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Washington Wizards, also donated the money to build the statue. And so we've been trying to get his name out. The book has really been a journey in itself, in that I wanted to write a book probably ever since he had been inducted into the Hall of Fame. But I really didn't want to write it, so I hired a ghostwriter who literally ghosted when it was time to turn in the manuscript. And it was the universe telling me that you need to write your own damn book. And really and truly, I doubt if I would have liked the way that anyone else would have written it anyway. And so I'm hoping that this book does well. I was invited up to Harvard for an event by the basketball coach there at Harvard, where the guest speaker was going to be Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA. And the host allowed me a couple of minutes to talk about my grandfather's Harvard connection, his legacy, and basketball, and the book that's going to be coming out. And so I was able to talk to Adam Silver, and he said that he would help to promote the book. So I have the MBA behind the promotion of this book as well. And so, hey, it's for real. It's happening. Yeah. So, are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions?
There's a question right there.
Yes.
I had a comment there.
Yes.
Well, I read the book. I ordered the book.
Did you bring it?
I read it, yeah.
Did you bring it?
No, but I'm gonna buy another one and get it signed.
Okay.
And I'm gonna send my other one to Dr. Harper.
Okay.
Dr. Harper out in California. So, you know, the thing that struck me about it, of course, I learned more about Dr. E.B. Henderson than I really knew. He was much more dynamic than I knew, although I always accepted him as being a wonderful leader in civil rights and in sports. But he was even more than that. He was really a giant. But what really surprised me about it is that little old Ed Henderson, who he and his brother used to throw my newspaper, wrote such a scholarly work. And I told Pat, I said, Pat, Ed wrote a scholarly work. and it really is. It's so well documented. The story is told with heart and with precision. And I was really impressed, Ed. You really done something wonderful here.
Thank you.
Of course, Dr. E.B. Henderson was one of my insurance clients.
Yes.
And I always remember he used to drive that antique car and you could hardly see his head. And it's kind of frightening to an insurance agent when you see that. But, and then later, my mother was in the same position driving her.
Yeah.
But Dr. E.B. Henderson was a wonderful man. In addition to really organizing black sports so that it could be respected and so that it could be replicated, was really a wonderful thing. But as you know, Ed, as an NAACP, former staff member of the NAACP and local branch president, I could really appreciate what Dr. Henderson did when it was really dangerous, exceedingly dangerous, to do what he did.
Yeah.
And so I just really, really appreciate that. But one other thing I want to mention. As you know, and as others will know when they read the book, Dr. E.B. Henderson organized that NAACP branch in Falls Church. But before that, he had been involved in civil rights. But significantly, he pulled the community together to do those things.
Yes.
And what was relevant to me in my life is that his son, Dr. J.M. Henderson, pulled the community together to organize the Big Bear Boycott. He called together a group of leaders in the community because there were complaints from the employees at the Big Bear supermarket. And you know, the heads of the sororities, I was president of the NAACP branch at that point in time, and various other leaders, you know, in the community. And we decided that we wanted to do something about that problem. And we did. As everybody knows, we did the Big Bear Boycott. But it is significant that Dr. J.M. Henderson did exactly here what E.B. Henderson had done in Falls Church. I think that's significant. Now, the ball's in your court.
Thank you for your compliment. You know, let me just say this. When I moved into the house in Falls Church, in the attic there was a box. And in that box, and I think I talk about this in the book as well, in this box was the contents of his file cabinet. And the treasures that were in that box, and the photo albums that he and his wife had put together over so many years, really were the roadmap for me to write this book. Not to mention that there was so much material out there, articles that he had written, particularly the one in the Afro-American upon his retirement in 1954, where he did an 8-part series which was like a memoir. And in many ways, in my book, I tried to use his quotes. I think it's more powerful that he tells his story rather than me to paraphrase it. And therefore I've got I think 417 citations in this book. Not all his, but it could have been a doctoral thesis if I had an advisor, I guess, and was associated with the university. But I had a lot of help too. I had a lot of help from the editors, my publisher, even the ghostwriter that ghosted on me gave me a lot of help as far as understanding how the publishing industry works. I'm no expert. I made a lot of mistakes too. It was a journey, and I'm still learning. But I think that I have a product here now, which, like you were saying, is a scholarly work. And the challenge now is to get it in front of the people that will help to push it to where it needs to be. And I think having the NBA behind it also doesn't hurt.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I understand. As you were speaking, you mentioned organizing black sports. Could you expand upon that? Because I'm not familiar with any of that.
By starting, he set in place the infrastructure, the league, the organization for officials, promoting the sport, writing about the sport. As David Aldridge, who wrote the foreword in my book and is a Hall of Fame basketball journalist, he tells you how E.B. Henderson was a one-man band. In other words, he would organize these teams to play sports. He would referee those teams, and then after he got finished refereeing, he would write up the story for the newspaper for it to be chronicled. Okay, so what he did is he ushered in an era of organized sports. He made it so that African Americans would have leagues and other apparatus to actually participate in organized sports, be that basketball, football, baseball, or what have you. But the book also talks about other sports as well, like the Washington Bears, or how in Washington the Homestead Grays used to play half their season at Griffith Stadium. And the sellout crowd was always when the Homestead Grays would play against the Kansas City Monarchs. It was a classic battle between Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige. They sold more tickets than the Washington Senators did. And they were more entertaining than the Washington Senators. And this was, a lot of my book is about black sports, or sports in general in Washington, D.C. Okay. But also we talk about there's one chapter on the courtship between my grandmother and grandfather, because I have 100 letters between the two of them during their courtship. Now, my grandfather, there was somebody that called my grandfather a Clark Gable in sepia. Okay, he was a pretty good-looking guy. I think you would agree with that. And they had challenges, in their relationship, like any relationship, but they were married for 67 years. So it's something to be said about that.
I have one follow-up.
Yeah.
This is comment. I found it very interesting. We just finished Women's History Month last month, and as you were talking, it occurred to me that out of Virginia, you had a scientist. I would call her a scientist, Katherine Johnson, Then you had an educator, Booker T. Washington, and now organizer of black sports, all out of Virginia. So is there some secret sauce in Virginia you see or something? Just something. I just put those three together just because we just did this thing. And it just occurred to me there's a lot of innovators and leaders out of Virginia. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute that to this. Ever since 1790, when the census began to be taken, there was also something called a slave census or slave enumeration. Virginia, from the very beginning, had more slaves in it, enslaved people, should I say, than any other state. I mean, and this is, that's before the 1790 was before the end of the Atlantic slave trade in 1808. But also, as brutal as anything, was the domestic slave trade, which I also talk about in the book as well. This book has a lot of context, okay? In other words, it's not just enough to tell the story, you also there's a backstory that needs to be told in order to understand the full picture. And after 1808, the domestic slave trade set it up so that Virginia and most of the northern border states where they were growing tobacco, after the advent of the cotton gin, all of the slaves were being sold down into the lower states where they needed blacks to pick cotton, okay? And so an enslaved person in Virginia that might be worth or have a value put on them of $500 might be worth $1,000 in the New Orleans slave trade. And so a lot of people were selling their slaves from and actually breeding their slaves, and breeding black people. And then they would be marched down to the south and sold in the southern markets, okay? So you had more slaves and enslaved people in Virginia than any other state in 1790, okay? But you also had a lot of people that would escape to freedom as well. Washington, D.C., from 1840 to 1860, had a large percentage of free blacks. And a lot of blacks were trying to make their way to places like Philadelphia where they could be free, or to New York or northern states. Virginia was known as a slave breeding state, okay? We were chattel, and they knew that by breeding us, that they could get a better price in the southern market than they could in the northern market. And it's not a very flattering story, but it's the truth. And my whole thing is that I'm about the truth. And it's not critical race theory, it's just the truth. And so I make sure that I include it in the book. Yes, Judy?
Yes, I was going to say, I am just so happy and excited that you've taken the time to write this book. You've done so many things, Ed, here. And I've known you since you were my babysitter. No, but your mom was, for some that may not know, Mrs. Henderson, of course, was my kindergarten teacher, and as well, she was my supervisor when I took early childhood education in high school and got certified and worked under her at Russell Nursery. And your father, of course, was my biology teacher on campus, and I walked with him 14 miles. But one of the things, and so I really commend you for all that you've done, and you've done so much not only with this book. And yesterday was a testament. There were so many people at the book signing yesterday. Ran out of books. But what I did want to say, two things come to mind. First of all, after you talked about all of those letters between your grandmother I thought, wow, that's another book and another sport.
Yeah. That's a whole other book.
Yeah, another sport that he was really good at.
There's some of those letters I'm going to keep to myself.
Yes, please.
I don't want to air my dirty line.
No, and I don't think you would be pleased. But the second thing that came to mind was when you talked about organized sport. I thought with the park being named the Henderson Park, that this book ought to inspire perhaps in Macon County and Tuskegee using this book as part of a catalyst for Tuskegee to organize the young men, children here for basketball, and let's start something that could be duplicated in a lot of cities, with youth leagues, and just as a result of this book, could be the rekindling of something.
Well, that would be wonderful. I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Right now, I just hope that they can fix the pool
No,
so we can
we're working on it. The mayor can talk about that.
swim in this summer. Or even, up on campus, they don't have really a working swimming pool there. I remember we used to have swim teams in HBCUs, and the university doesn't even have a working swimming pool.
Basketball, and I think that that's something, intramural teams and little league or things of that nature too. Basketball camps at Tuskegee University that were students. I know I was a majorette and cheerleader, and I went to two in high school at Tuskegee Institute High. And we went to two different majorette cheerleading camps, and that's something that could happen at Tuskegee University. And I think this book really could focus and be a renaissance of.
With the renaissances, I'm hoping it will take place here in Tuskegee. Hopefully, that will be something that we can see happen.
Right. Okay.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So let's give Ed another big hand. We are so grateful. I just want to thank you so much for what you do. And I was sitting here listening, and I'm reminded of, if anyone in here has seen the movie Sankofa or are familiar with the term, it's a Khan proverb that says, in order to move forward effectively, we have to look back and bring forward the story. Yes. I think in some families there are chosen ones who are divinely guided, if you will, to tell stories. And as you were talking, I was thinking about Linda Kenny Miller, who had a very similar experience, where she found a box of her grandfather's records, and wrote Beacon on the Hill. There are so many stories that are ours and uniquely ours that nobody can tell like we can tell them. And so I just want to applaud you, my kindergarten teacher's baby boy. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that when you told me that you were doing this because of my mother, I said, my mother is looking down on me and blessing me with you.
Absolutely.
Helping me to come here and do this.
I don't think I would have been a kindergarten teacher without her. I can still see her sitting us in the circle and reading The Cat in the Hat and all of those wonderful stories. She was just a wonderful human being. And she taught me again at Tuskegee Institute at the time.
Yes.
When I majored in early childhood.
Yes.
So she taught me twice.
Me too.
So Dwight Hay, glad you made it.
How are you? I'm glad.
There is lots of food back there, and there are lots of books up here. So if you don't have your book, you can come up here and get your book signed. And if you have not eaten, there's plenty of food back there. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say, yesterday, when he had the book signing at the museum on campus, he sold out. I mean, it was just amazing. They were buying 3 books at a time.
I want the mayor to speak. Mayor, would you just say just a word about what we are attempting to do at Henderson Park for this coming summer? We are working very diligently to try to get Henderson Park. So much has happened over the last 30, 40 years that people think we have magic wands that we can just fix everything, but Mr. Mayor say a word.
Okay. Again, thank you. It's some work going on in Henderson Park now. To try to get it back in shape. Again, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Look forward to reading the book. And that effort's being led by one of the first black quarterback at Atlanta Falcons came out of Tuskegee High School. And he's come back to the community and decided that he wants to see recreation back here the way it was. Gilbert Renfro.
Gilbert Renfro.
He was the first black quarterback at Atlanta Falcons, and he graduated from Tuskegee Institute High School. And he's finally come back here and he's married Macon, one of the Macon girls. One of the Macon ladies, I should say. They remarried, and she lost her husband a few years ago, I think. And so, as an effort going on to revitalize Henderson Park, we went into it a few years ago, we were working on a major grant. It didn't work out, so we're still trying to get back to it. We were determined to get it reopened this summer, and we're down the road about a little over 3/4 away now. Matter of fact, we had a meeting Friday about that, and we've committed other resources to it and to get this timeline done. But the first thing is to get the pool reopened. We won't have the high diving board, but it's going to be reopened in a way that'll be safe and effective for the young people. The final thing that I was told we have to get is a rail to go down the steps into the pool. But everything else has been done. And the thing that's exciting about it, a number of the students from the university have been involved in this effort. When we went down to do some things as a group that have been organized called the Tuskegee University Anglers, fishermen. They have a fishing club now called Tuskegee University Anglers. And they have about 50 members. And they fish down on the lake from time to time. So they came down and wanted to get involved and say what could be done to, work at the, around the lake and at Henderson Park and improve it. So we got them organized and got together and set up a date to come down. We came down the first date, which was supposed to be moderate, and it would be extremely cold. So much so I put on 2 jackets. I brought one jacket, went back to the car, I got another jacket, but that morning they came and they stayed, and what was amazing was the energy that they brought. And I was telling a lot of folks, it was interesting that the young ladies led a lot of the efforts. Cold as it was, they were out there with the shovels, they were pulling down vines off the fence. So long story short, it looks much better now. And we're in the final stages of it. We probably have about 30% more of the work to do, and we'll have it finished. And one of the things Gilbert asked the other day when I went down and met, and he met with the city manager as well, said, look, we got to come on together because we're down the last 6 weeks. We may have to put some more money into it because we've committed to get it back open. So that's kind of where we are. And then once we get that done, we're planning to do some other things. But our main goal is to make sure by Memorial Day that the pool will be open, it'll be safe. A lot of things that have been refurbished and a great cosmetic job has been done. And initially, several months ago, a lot of infrastructure work had to be done to the pool, the pipes and the filters and all that kind of thing. So now it's a matter of getting everything on the outside finished up, and we'll be ready to open it for the young people. And that's the excitement about it. In your story, you talk about how Dr. Henderson was working to bring, recreation to our community. What was interesting to me was that here were other young people at the college who came and committed to make sure that the young people in this community would have recreation again in Henderson Park. So it's just interesting to see how they, in their college years, are coming out into our community to help improve it so young people in our community can do some of the things that they said they did when they were younger. So we're doing Henderson now. We're also working on Abbott Park. We've required the help of Representative Pevin Warren and the director of ADECA, Boswell. She and I met with him, and they put everybody else out the room. He said, I'm going to give you the money. He said, Mayor, y'all got to go back and correct some things that were left undone at the parks down there. He said, we gave some money several years ago, and this is how it is. He said, and it got left undone and didn't get the reports. If you would just get me a report and get some of the work done, we will come back and we will release $200,000 to you to redo the tennis courts and the basketball court at Abbott and anything else you can do with it. It has to be bid out according to law. It's our releasing. So recently he released that money to us. We did some work down there. And he's released the money to us. I think other money will be coming. So things are going on at the parks. And the third part of it, Judge Ford has joined us, former Judge Aubrey Ford. And some other community members have joined us on our recreation committee with our recreation staff to plan the completion of these projects, but also the development of a new park. And we're looking at putting a new park, perhaps out by Booker T. Washington High School, probably 10 to 15 acres, because it'll primarily be to develop a new pool, basketball court, so we'll have a third park to go along with the parks that we have and try to improve. But a new park will be easier to do a new pool rather than try to do the pool at Albert Park. We've had studies done, we've had people say, well, it's just gonna be too much, so what we would have to do, an intent, perhaps at Albert would be to put in a splash pad. Still will have recreation there, but not the pool. We would have the pool at Henderson, then we develop a new pool out by Booker T. Washington High School. The other reason is also to make it an Olympic pool where it would be a competition pool. Mm-hmm. That way we bring competition sports here out by Booker T. Washington High School. What a lot of people didn't understand is when there was a battle in Montgomery to have the water park that they had. Well, the city of Montgomery, state of Alabama was pledged $20 million to them. But when it got ready to come out of the state legislature, they cut it. Folks from different cities around the area cut it out of the legislation, only gave them $5 million, thinking the project would fail. Fortunately, the county got together with the city, Montgomery County, the city of Montgomery, and they finished the park. If you notice this weekend, I think it was this weekend, they actually had Olympic trials going on out of that park, at the new water park in Montgomery, because they knew if they built that, they would have a competition level water park that would bring people all over there. So people from all over come into Montgomery to the new water park, and they will be coming, others will be coming later this year. So that's one of the reasons we want to build a new pool and have Olympic-sized pool so competition can go on there, not only at the high school level, but even at the university level, because right now the university has no pool. There was one originally, Logan Hall, that was closed. Then when Chapel James was built, there was one at the bottom of Chapel James. So the university doesn't have a pool, so we're going to try to do it. So that's kind of what's going on there, a few things in our park, and some plans to get some things done.
It's interesting that you use the word commitment.
Yeah.
That's very important if you're going to accomplish anything. Like in my book, I committed certain days of the week that I was going to write.
Right.
Of course, the other part of that, when you're dealing with things like you're talking about, is money. But the commitment, if the commitment is there and you got the right people, you can find the money. That's true.
I think that's the thing that's encouraged us is we got the commitment to a level we haven't seen with some people who've done things in the community earlier. But the other thing is we're finally getting some development in the community, so we'll have more resources. And the university has pledged to join in with the Board of Education, with the county, with the city. So with all of us working together, we are sure we can get the money to get this done. And we start to see it.
Well, my heart is in Tuskegee. I love Tuskegee, but I live in Atlanta. I talk to so many people all the time, and it's just very encouraging to hear some of the developments and things. This is my first time kind of coming back to hear something, not the first, but it's good information to share with others. But is there any I've heard positive things about the mayor in Montgomery. Are you all working, is there any collaborations with Montgomery finally having a positive mayor, and you're doing such a great job?
Tremendous. When Mayor Reed was elected, we had the Conference of Black Mayors meeting here. I invited him to speak right after he was elected. He came down and spoke and told all the mayors, Conference of Black Mayors, which is mostly smaller mayors, smaller communities, medium and smaller communities like ours, he would do whatever he could, and he's been doing it. And after that, it just kept going. And he's called me regularly, so much so that people at the Chamber of Montgomery say, what's going on with Tuskegee? Why are they always calling Tuskegee? Because I go to things in Montgomery all the time representing Tuskegee and invite others. But he will be the president of the African American Mayors Association, which is a national organization this year. He will be, later this month, he will take office as president of that association.
Wow.
And Mayor Selma asked me to become president of the Alabama Conference of Black Mayors, because he said, well, Reed there, we need you to take over the Conference of Black Mayors so we can bring that connection of all our mayors together. So it is a connection, and he's doing a great job in Montgomery.
Well, that collaboration is important, and that's great. That's the power.
And the final thing I want to say is coming up is in the middle of this week, finally, there are two great things that happened this weekend. I was going to get there. My understanding is that the university finally signed the lease for the 4.7 acres to get the pilot travel center going down at exit 38. That was over. And I heard from several quality sources, because I kept hearing it was close. I said, close, I don't want to talk about close anymore until we know it's signed. But I was told and confirmed today as well that it's a done deal.
All right.
And Pilot was so convinced that they had already started ordering equipment. You might have seen some activity out there. That's Pilot. Pilot was bringing in a brand new travel center. They'll invest almost $8 million more out there.
We said May 2nd, something that's gonna be done.
Now, they're going to start on it. It's going to take them 90 days. It'll be done before, football season, before our first home game.
Good.
Yeah, it should be open then. It'll be perfect time.
Wow.
The other major thing is finally, after many years of working on it, we're going to have a regional airline come and provide pilot training at Moulton Field.
Wow.
We'll start pilot training again. The governor will be here this Wednesday to announce it. Finally, we got that settled. So she'll be here 10 o'clock a.m. to announce pilot training again at Moulton Field, which would be good for us because it's not only training, you're going to have people from all the United States coming in. There's a special program that Senator Katie Britt gave money to, $6.7 million I was telling you about, for flight training.
Yes.
So they will offer flight training in their curriculum. Republic Airlines is a regional airlines out of the Mideast, Indiana, Illinois. They will be doing it, but they'll be bringing people from all the United States into a flight academy, and a number of them will be going to the university as well.
Wow.
So we got those things going on, which is great. And then Lionel Rich and Lowe's will open up Hello Park on Thursday.
Wow.
Yes, that's good stuff.
All right. Okay. Go ahead,
I'd
Mike.
like to just say, maybe last but not least, but Ed and I grew up together. Boy Scouts, and his father was one of our scoutmasters, and you know, you are the epitome of scouting, you know, for what it has taught us, you know, from the beginning.
Be prepared.
Well, be prepared, and the dedication that it takes to go through and learn the merit badges and to take on challenges, as in learning how to write a novel or a book like you did, and it shows that you never stop learning. I still try as I can with, you know, the few Scouts candidates when I can to pass on those things, and I hope that in some way we can, you know, bring that back. I was talking to a young man earlier today, and he was saying that he's trying to create a mentorship program, and that would be a good opportunity for us to maybe try to, you know, make a marriage between the two, and to bring them up so that you know, we can start bringing out more positive young men like our group that came through, and the association with the university, which I would really like to see, since we were chartered by the university. I was telling someone, I think the other day, that all of my merit badges were done here in Tuskegee, between the university and the hospital. We had all of those people who could give us the information, and an important thing was they were black people talking to you. And they taught you with respect, but they still demanded you learn. And that kind of nurturing is what we really were looking forward to having back. But it's, you know, I knew your father very well, so it doesn't surprise me, your grandfather, what he did, because your father was, of course, a major contributor to this country as well. And so I congratulate you, and it's good to see you. I hadn't seen you since we were for quite a while, and look forward to reading your book.
Okay, so if you want a book, you come this way. If you want food, you go that way and just hang out as long as you
It's
want.
like Councilwoman Jackson, because she
Yeah.
come in there with a lot of headaches.
Came back from Montgomery.
We've been all over this thing.
Come on, you ain't knowing that.